Thanks for coming again, Kent. Kent is a veteran of GamesBeat events here.
Thanks for having me, Dean.
Yeah. Well, Kabam has done very well in mobile and social games with 6 titles that have generated more than $100 million in revenue. Marvel Contest of Champions is the latest. It's still a top 10 grossing game for the last 14 months now. But you've also had to adjust your staff in San Francisco, recently cut 25 jobs. You've discontinued and sold off some older games and recently announced 2 new games, Avatar and Transformers. So it seems like you're continuously changing the way you do business, and it's very complicated.
I think complicated is an understatement for the mobile game industry. It's complicated, it's dynamic, it's fast-paced, and it's a lot of fun. Think about what's happened over the last 6 months. You had John Henke sitting right here yesterday talking about Pokemon Go, right? We have introduced through a mobile experience a whole new way of playing and engaging outside of the home and bringing location game to the masses. And I mean, what they have done is grow the entire mobile gaming industry. Just months before that, you had Supercell with Clash Royale introducing PvP to a global audience on a simultaneous ship launch date. Right? At Kabam, we have been really leading the way with licensed IP, and recently our Marvel Contest of Champions game has become the highest grossing Marvel game of all time across every platform, console, PC, right? So the mobile gaming industry is growing dramatically. Multi-billion-dollar games are being developed that rival traditional console and PC. So it's complicated, it's dynamic, and then definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah. So how do you account for that Marvel game's continued success?
Well, we launched Marvel Contest of Champions December of 2014, and the game this July was its highest grossing revenue month of all time. The game continues to grow. So how do we account for that? First,
that's $25 million a month?
Generating in excess of $25 million a month in revenue. And you can see that via App Annie. First, you start with amazing teams, right? So Kabam's Vancouver team is simply one of the best mobile game developers, just awe-inspiring, and I bow at their feet every time I see them. But I think it's also, there's a fundamental shift in how we think about games within Kabam. So, and Kevin Chu, our CEO, wrote this for VentureBeat, that we've shifted from traditional ways of thinking about DAU and MAU, and what a lot of people have talked about in terms of going after whales or VIPs, and we've kind of thrown that all out the window and focused on what we call regulars. Regulars are the people who play our game every single day. Right? You think about a bar, it's the people who come into the bar every day. How do we make the game experience for these customers who are playing and engaging with your content every single day, whether it's the payers or the players? How do you create an environment where you're putting on a show for them and engaging them every single day? And if you can do that right, then that just flows through the entire game itself. So we've created a shift in our mentality and catering to this much smaller subset of our player base, but they represent 80% of our revenue. And they are playing our games over an hour and a half every single day, right? So you think about, it's not a casual gameplay. It's not trying to optimize for DAU. It's trying to optimize for this core base of users who are playing every day. And by the way, with that core base of users, we have almost 100% retention rate, right? So they're playing every day, they're engaged every day, and they're sticking around. So if you think about how do you invest in a game to make it last for years and years and years, that's what we're doing. And now we're thinking about how do we have games that can last in the mobile space for a decade.
The funny thing is that I guess I remember Kevin describing that kind of audience as the main audience of Dragons of Atlantis, the unbranded original Kabam game that you started with, I guess, and now it's this big Marvel game. that has so much more potential reach, you're still sort of addressing the same kind of player as your main target, I guess.
It's definitely a key audience that's in many games, whether it's our early games like Dragons of Atlantis or The Hobbit or Kingdoms of Camelot, and they've been there. But it's how do you serve this audience group, right? And so much of kind of historic thinking had been focused on DAUs, and how are we getting these players who may come in and leave the game, how do we get them to retain, and putting lots of energy there? Or there were swings in the industry focused on your biggest spenders, how do you focus time there? But what we realized with a lot of data and a lot of hindsight, that it is really this core player base, that if you can engage them and create social systems and social engagement and provide content for that group, they will stick around for the longest period of time. And it is that kind of eye-opening kind of analysis that we did that shifted how we think about game development.
You mentioned the two new games, Avatar and Transformers. How can you approach these differently so that they can be global hits?
Well, we've taken a lot of that same learning about how do you create deep systems that will engage customers for years and years. And so when we think about creating games, we've talked about our strategy of fewer, bigger, bolder. So now the average development cost for each one of our games is about $14 million just to get to launch, and that's not including marketing. We think about, really, there's kind of two key buckets. One is, how do you create a game that has exciting visual elements and highly accessible gameplay that can get people in the game quickly, get them engaged, and really help with some core early kind of conversion metrics, right? Getting people, opening the top of the funnel, getting people in, getting lots of people to play the game, and effectively lowering your CPI. So we spend a lot of time looking at that so that you can kind of drop down your CPI as much as you can, because that's critical in the world that we live in. And then the second, which is even more important, is when we start even greenlighting a game, we're thinking about what is the social gameplay within the game. How are you going to get people to play together, interact together, and engage together for years? So you start with that, and then you also start with, even very early up in the prototype stage, what are the kind of the deep elder game loops or game systems that you're going to have? And so we look at putting those into the game to make sure that we can kind of have a deep social system, deep elder games, and that will ultimately correlate to a much higher LTV. So those are the two kind of key areas that we think about as we think about greenlighting new projects.
I think you guys had a peak of maybe 800 people. You're about 700 now. You recently had this layoff of 25 people in San Francisco. Can you talk about what that means, I guess?
Yeah, so we've been pretty transparent about our strategy, which has been moving away from a lot of the legacy games that we had. We had about 15 different tech stacks at one time between all the different studios. And we've consolidated everything in the company onto one singular tech stack and a game engine that we have called Fuse Sparks. And that's kind of been, unfortunately had to say goodbye to a number of employees because of that. And then recently, one of our games didn't perform the way that we had expected, our Star Wars Uprising game. I see you have the Stormtrooper right there. Unfortunately, some of those, we adjusted the team size. So some of we said goodbye to some people at Kabam, which is always hard. But meanwhile, we've been aggressively staffing up in our Vancouver studio that has our new Transformers game, in our LA studio that has our Avatar game, and then another unannounced game that's being developed in LA. So we will be, we're growing, and in fact adding more people than we recently laid off in those locations. But we did make some adjustments in San Francisco.
So let's discuss China a little. You put 18 months into adapting Marvel Contest of Champions for China. You had a partner for it, and then had to switch to publishing it on your own on iOS. It made it to #1, but then dropped in the charts. What are some of the lessons for you guys?
Well, Dean, you started this off by saying mobile gaming is complicated. I will emphasize that China is even more complicated than anything else. So we put a lot of emphasis into China. China it now represents the largest geography on iOS. It surpassed the US and Japan, and it is the largest mobile gaming market in the world. So it is a market that we all need to be thinking about. And we've been spending a lot of time there. We've been fortunate to have a Beijing office that's developed some of our most successful Western games. We set out, and a publishing group rolls up to me, and we set out with a kind of an audacious goal of can we self-publish a game in China on iOS, and can we drive installs, can we drive it to the top of the charts, can we get consumers into the game? And that meant from a technical perspective, getting all the hosting done, meant from a regulatory perspective, getting all the licensing done, but more importantly, from a marketing perspective, getting all the performance marketing, the attribution, the ad networks, both Chinese and Western, who are moving into China, getting that all aligned and launching, and we had success, right? And what I'm excited about is this is a success that can be replicated by anyone here in this audience. Right? It is a success that any Western company can go after. It's not easy, it's hard, but I think what we proved to ourselves is that you can launch a game in China and you could drive it to become the #1 downloaded game, which we did with Marvel, with over 2.5 million installs in just a short period of time. Now, the other part of the equation is the game itself, and unfortunately, gameplay in China is radically different than in the West, and so we've learned a lot of lessons. I don't think we had the balance of the game the way that we thought, and the retention didn't kind of stack up the way we wanted. So performance of the game wasn't exactly where we wanted it to be, but we now know, and we have the infrastructure to publish games into China on iOS, which is a huge milestone for us.
I guess because of your track record with licensed IP, I imagine there's a lot of companies that are, knocking on your doors to give you more of it, I guess. And eventually, it seems though you want to do your own IP games. Will you guys have a chance to do that, given that, somebody may throw another license like Avatar at you, I guess?
Well, at Kabam, we've developed a real special, infrastructure to handle licensed IP, and we've done a lot of great success. Marvel is a tremendous example where the teams work so closely together that Kabam has actually created Marvel characters like Guillotine, Venom Pool, Civil Warrior that have now been created by Kabam employees up in Vancouver and reintroduced into the Marvel universe by Marvel down here in Burbank. Right? It is a testament to how great our team in Vancouver is. And so we're proud about what we can do with licensed IP, but that's not the only thing we do. We've had our own IP in the past, and we have a game in beta right now that's an original IP that we're excited by. So we're not only licensed IP, but I think that we create and really have become brand stewards for some of the biggest licenses in the world, and we're very proud of it.
So 2 of the 3 largest M&A deals in games have come from Chinese companies. Do you think we're going to see a lot more of this coming?
Yes. I just got back from China Joy, and there is so much excitement in the industry. There are so many different companies, a consortium of companies that had looked at Supercell, that had looked at Playtika, and there's a lot of companies that weren't successful in those acquisitions, and they're all looking. And I think you will see a lot more M&A activity coming from Chinese or other Asian companies acquiring Western companies.
So I'll ask these sort of 2 questions all at once here, I guess. But what's your opinion of the state of mobile gaming, and how does this sort of affect your strategy? But also, why is mobile still your beacon if there are other things out there like AR and VR?
So mobile gaming continues to grow. You're seeing games that are now generating multiple billions of dollars in revenue. I mean, Pokemon Go, I don't know what the latest forecasts are, but that is definitely a multi-billion-dollar franchise. You also have, everyone here has one of these in their pocket, right? And everyone here has the opportunity to play, whether it's listening to me talk right now or when they go outside. Mobile is here. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. So in terms of platforms that have deep penetration, mobile is the biggest opportunity that we as a company see today. So we continue to invest everything that we do in terms of free to play and being a mobile first company. VR is exciting. It's dynamic. It's immersive. I think it has the ability to radically change kind of how we experience things in life. But from a device penetration, we're not there yet, right? We're still early days, growing rapidly. And also from a free-to-play infrastructure perspective, it's not there, right? So I believe that it will get there, and it will get there very quickly. But for us to kind of make a commitment of tens of millions of dollars to start developing for it, we don't see the penetration yet in terms of devices. Now that being said, it will happen.
Very good. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dean.
Okay.